I don't have too many more of these to make. I didn't plan to turn this channel into a lore channel or nothing like that. There's just a few topics, and I already plan to make at least 10 topics about things that I thought about, or have been thinking about, or have been thinking that are worth talking about. Theories that I've had for hours, for days, for months, for weeks, for years, or something new that I just came across. It doesn't really matter. The reason why you're getting swamped with them is because I've been recording a bunch of these in advance. Earlier on, days and days ago, probably all in the same sitting or over the course of a few days, because that's usually how this works. I think of something, and then a couple days later, it may take a little bit longer for me to recall what I was thinking about. It's a brilliant idea, a brilliant thing, and then it goes away, and then it comes back here months, years later, who knows. That's just how things work with me, so I had to record most of all this stuff in advance, and then I decided to spread them out over the course of a couple weeks or whatever. Today, we're going to be talking about Chim, Anti-Chim, Vivek, Dagoth, did Tiber Septim achieve Chim? What is Chim? You could reshape reality. Is that exactly what it is, or is that just to cover one's own butts so that they could write in something in a game that they wanted to do? Yada, 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 yada. For example, in Daggerfall and Arena, earlier on, Cyrodiil was written to be jungled. It was all jungled and lots of trees, lots of woodland, jungled. It wasn't plains as you would see in Oblivion until it was written to be so by somebody. Somebody came up with the idea. Maybe it was Todd Howard or something. He said, I want to do a Lord of the Rings style thing. Well, Lord of the Rings, because Return of the King is like one of the greatest, biggest fantasy movies ever made. And it came out, I want to say 2004-ish. Oblivion, 2003 or 2004-ish. It was filmed around the exact same time as the other two films, so they released it a couple years in between, yada yada. That's how they did the trilogy, whatever. But Return of the King was still pretty fresh. It's on everybody's minds, and maybe around that time, Todd Howard was all over Lord of the Rings. He was trying to bank on it, trying to get that money on that stuff, because Morrowind and Redguard, well, not Redguard wasn't exactly a smash hit, but it did establish the lore that made Morrowind a smash hit. And then the money, he had dollar signs for eyes, maybe, and Todd Howard said, you know what, let's make a Lord of the Rings style game, and that's why the Deadlands look like Mordor, and that's why the towers look like the Towers of Barad-dûr. That was all intentional. He did that all intentional to make it look like Lord of the Rings, because he was inspired by Lord of the Rings at the time for Oblivion, yada, 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 yada. And one of the biggest changes that was made around this time was changing Cyrodiil from a jungle to plains, because it was originally made to be jungles, and so somebody came up with this idea to say, what if Tiber Septim became a deity and he changed it to plains, so that you could make your Lord of the Rings style plains land in Cyrodiil? What if that's one of those powers and all that stuff? And so they decided to write that in to cover their butts so that they could do what they want. So that if they want to make a retroactive big change from something that may have been there for plenty of games or for a very long time, they could just retroactively change things, change ideas, change writing. This is one of the methods they could use to change something that was already there in the previous games that is no longer there in the next games going forward. This is the great idea. This is the great thing. So before that idea, this wasn't part of what this thing was. Then again, most of Chim was all created around the time of Redguard and Morrowind, all thanks to the holy tribunal of writers of Ken Ralston, Kurt Coleman, and Michael Kirkbride, and probably a bunch of other people involved as well, but those are the big three that I usually read up on and who are involved in all this stuff. In the universe, we know that we think two people have achieved Chim. We think two. One being Tiber Septim, or Hjalti, Early Beard, and the other being Vivek. Those are the only two we think achieved it. The reason why we think Vivek achieved it is because of the 36 lessons of Vivek, where he's practically teaching Chim to the Hortator. And these, who knows when these sermons were written? Could have been written centuries ago. It had to have been after Dagoth Ur showed up, but who knows? Dagoth Ur had showed up a long time ago, and they've been around. The tribunal has still been in Morrowind for a very long time afterwards. So who knows when the Vivec sermons were written? It's almost as if Vivec predicted Dagoth Ur falling to the Terraverse. He predicted this, and he knew he had to make a Terraverse who is a prisoner. He turned the Terraverse, which implies that there have been other Terraverse who were not prisoners. Now, what the prisoner is, and I keep doing quotations marks like that, is because the prisoner is basically you, the player character. That's the mythological description of the hero character. He is the prisoner. That's why you always start the game in a prison of some sort, in a dungeon or a prison or whatever. You break out, and then you are free from restraints. It's a metaphorical thing. It's also a symbological thing. You are not restrained to the world in the way that the other NPCs are. You could do a bunch of things that other NPCs cannot do. And so the theory is that the other Terraverse that came before your Morrowind character were not prisoners, were not the player character. And Vivec realized that you needed to be a player character Terraverse to stop Dagoth Ur. So he orchestrated this entire thing. And the Vivec lessons are basically him centuries ago foreseeing all of this and explaining why he killed the Terraverse over and over and over until you, the player character Terraverse, were born, because you had to be born. You had to be the player character Terraverse, because the other Terraverse could not do it, so they had to die so that you could live. It's very complicated, obviously, and there's so much inference. Remember my implications of meaning video. It's very much implications of meaning for this entire 36 lessons here, but... And of course, he's also talking about Chim in and out and throughout all of this stuff, and he's explaining what it is, to a degree, to the Hortator, to both Nerevar and the Terraverse. Like, the lessons for the king, the lessons for the rulers, is both for the Nerevar and for Nerevarine, the Nerevarine. For you, the player character Terraverse. It's like he wrote these lessons for you, but they're just window dressing for everybody else. These lessons are actually for you, not really for the NPCs who just see them as sermons to bow, here's their big holy book, yada yada yada. But for you, this is his message across time, so as to say. That's another theory for you, but in it explains Chim and all that stuff. There's a lot of window dressing on what things happened. Did they really happen? Did Molag Bal and Vivec do that thingamajiggy, or is that just allegory, symbology, where Vivec and Molag Bal are characters reenacting a scene that actually happened a longer time ago between Anu and Padme and all this other stuff. Maybe he's rewriting actual moments and further back history, window dressing it with himself added into it and other people added into it who weren't always there. But that's all just theory. And he also talked about Anti-Chim in the 36 lessons of Vivec. Anti-Chim, which is basically, okay, the best way I could explain Chim is, the Orbis is creation. It was the result of the intermingling of stasis and change. Anu is stasis. Anu would never have done anything were it not perceiving Padme having done something. Anu is very reactive. It's not an action first person. Anu would have done nothing, and would never have created the universe had Padme not acted, had Padme not caused something or did something for Anu to perceive it, and therefore perceive itself, and therefore act. There would be nothing were it not for Padme, right? And so these two entities, these two forces of nature, these two concepts clash together, and they create their first spirits, which is Ariel, Lorcan, Sithis, whatever. Sithis is like the soul of Padme. Anuiel is the soul of Anu. Oriel is the firstborn of Anuiel. Lorcan is the firstborn of Sithis. And these characters, these spirits, their shapes are malleable depending upon who is worshipping them. For example, Oriel is not a dragon all the time to the High Elves. He's an eagle. Lorcan is sometimes a snake. He's sometimes a fox. Both are aspects of tricksters. And sometimes he might even be something else entirely. Who knows? Who knows? But we're getting a little bit off track here. Basically, with the reality and all this stuff, it's the Arbus. It's a wheel. It's essentially a wheel. The map of the Arbus. You can go look this up on for yourself if you like. Go Google it or something. You'll find a wheel. It's a circle. The creation, the reality is a circle. The inner circle, the innermost center of creation, is Nirn, the Mund. And outside of Nirn are 8 planets that orbit it. And outside of that is the realm of Oblivion. And outside of that is the realm of Aetherius. And outside of that is the Void. And that is the Arbus. And the Arbus, when you view a wheel on its side, for example, let's see. Here we go. This. When you view a disc, like this, Come on. When you see a disc flat like this, the disc is a wheel. The disc is a wheel. When you view the wheel on its side, it becomes an eye. It becomes flat, it says eye. The secret of the tower, the secret name of the tower is eye. And that is the secret of the Orbis. And if you perceive this secret of the tower is I, and apparently this will give you conceivability of the Godhead. Now the Godhead is I'm not exactly sure if this is fully canon. It's not necessarily mentioned in the sermons, but it's not necessarily not implied either. It could be implied if you think of it as implying it. Remember, implications of meaning. That's why a lot of this stuff is abstract. It's abstract on purpose so that these other things that were mentioned out of canon could be inferred to be in canon, and they can also be tossed out to not be, because it's inferred to not be that, be inferred to be this instead. And that's the great part of implications, is that you could derive meaning to mean something, or it could mean something else entirely, depending upon what whoever's in charge wants it to mean, or whoever's playing it wants it to mean. That's the best part about it. And so, the Godhead, according to the one theory, is that the world, all of reality, the entire Orbis, Anu, Padme, all of this stuff, it is a dream. It is a dream world. It is somebody's great idea. And technically this is very meta. This is getting very meta, because technically the world of the Elder Scrolls, the IP, was an idea. It was somebody's idea. It's the Godhead. The Godhead are the devs, developers, the company itself, maybe. Who knows? Maybe it's Todd Howard. Either way, the Godhead is the dreamer who dreams the reality. Everything inside of it, the NPCs, the Daedra, the Aedra. This is why I said all the gods aren't gods. It's because they're all ideas created by somebody. They're all ideas created by a creator, the dreamer. And maybe this is all unconscious. The dreamer is not consciously dreaming this up, and so once you look at the Arbus on its side and steal the secret from the tower, which is I, that secret is the Godhead, and you'll come to the realization that the entire reality is a dream. It doesn't really exist. Now, think back to my Numidium video from before, where I said that Numidium is anti-existence. The Numidium is this argument. When you're looking at this argument, it's the shortcut to this argument. You can look at non-existence through the Numidium and probably achieve a sort of apotheosis this way. Either way, you look in the face of the secret of the Godhead, which is, I don't exist, and you decide to say, I do exist. I am. but you can only say that by realizing that everything else in existence is all a part of you, because it's all a part of the Godhead. Basically saying, I am, all are we. I am, all are we. Let's try to make this a diagram, maybe. That might help. That might help. Yeah, that might help. So we have two circles, and we have an intersecting circle, right? These are terrible circles, I know. So we have the words I am, are, we, all. I am, that is you, the NPC. And this is all, everything in the Godhead are we, which is everything else that is not you. You have to realize that you are all part of the Godhead, but you have to reconcile your own existence. Very contradictory. You kind of become like a paradox, because you technically don't exist. You technically don't exist as apart from the Godhead, but you decide to exist anyways apart from the Godhead, and you are. It's like lucid dreaming. Now, if you don't know what lucid dreaming is, I've mentioned this a couple times before, but basically, it's like when you have a dream and there's a reality in your dream, there's an event playing out. Sometimes it's like a movie that you are forced to play in character on script. You are not able to go off script. You are playing the dream reality. You're playing a role in the reality. Let's say when you lucid dream, sometime through the dream, in the middle of the dream, or in the middle of the story, you realize, this is a dream. I am dreaming. Suddenly, you are no longer bound by the script that the dream and the story of that dream that you're having has played out already for you. You are now able to go off script, so as to say. You might even be able to change aspects of your dream. You could look at this chair and use your imagination to say, this chair is actually a Ferrari, and the chair turns into one. It turns into a Ferrari. And that's the kind of idea that came with Oblivion. It's like, through the act of lucid dreaming, you could look at this jungle and say, this jungle is not a jungle, this jungle is plains, lands, and it becomes plains lands. You are able to shape the reality. You shape the dream. It's basically like... it's basically like debug mode. It's basically like activating debug mode in a video game. You can activate God mode, you can add stuff to modify your save file, you can add items to your inventory, modify your stats to make yourself stronger than anything in the game if you wanted to. If you died, you could suddenly decide, I don't want to be dead anymore, and you'd be alive. It just, you are in control, essentially. That is the big reality here for this aspect. You have to have a sense of ego and a sense of acceptance as well. It's a very contradictory thing, but that's why Vivek is theoretically able to do this, because he is a contradiction. Looking at him, he is the half Dunmer, half Chimer. He is all about contrasting aspects that don't necessarily work together, but somehow do at the same time. That's kind of like what this is. What Anti-Chim is the thing that Dagoth had, which is basically looking at the same process for achieving this. You have the two circles again, right? You have the two circles again. I know this is a terrible drawing, terrible circles. All. And you have I am. So technically we have I am and all. That's both the two similar things here. But what Dagoth got wrong is are me. I am, all are me. Dagoth became the false dreamer. He believed the dream was his. He did attain a sort of lucid dreaming ability, not necessarily complete lucid dreaming ability. He attained powers similar to Kim, but he's still tied into the world because he hasn't realized he's in somebody else's dream. He believes the dream is his. He is in the place where all souls go until the next cycle, for when all souls return to the Orbis to live life again. Which is kind of like, in theory, to the Kalpas stuff with the Nordic pantheon and all of that stuff. I think I mentioned that in a previous video. If I didn't, I may have to mention it again, or I'll mention it right now. The theory is kind of like Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. Kind of. I'm going to write that one down here. Yes, these are big words. You can look them up later and figure them out on your own. I'm just going to briefly touch on them. Eternal recurrence. Right? So we have the eternal recurrence. This is by a philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche conceptualized the eternal return as determinism in some way, or some sort of way of explaining that everything that has ever happened has already happened. Where you have been before. Every action you have made before. Where you have been, time is a circle, which kind of fits in with this idea with Akatosh, with Ariel, the dragon god of time, with Alduin, and the cycle of creating the world, and Alduin eats the world, and the world is created again, and then Alduin eats that world, and it's created again. That's in the Nordic pantheon idea. And the idea of the eternal return is that everything that has ever happened in the previous cycle of time will happen exactly as it happened prior, again in the next cycle of time. The eternal return. Everything is going to happen exactly the same way. But here's where things deviate. We may have the new cycle of time, but things do happen differently. And that's all because of the patamaic aspects of change. So we may have a different cycle of return and all that stuff, but you will have changes throughout each cycle because of certain things playing out differently than how they played out prior. This might explain how so many cultures have the same deities but gave them different names, gave them different roles, gave them different meanings. For one set of people, they might say that Mara was on their side. For one set of people, they might say Mara was on their side, the Nords and the Ultima respectively. Maybe during one Kalpa, Mara decided to go try to entreat with Ariel for peace or something, and it is in that Kalpa, in that cycle, that the Ultima start to revere her, and they have still memories of that even in the next cycle, so they might still keep her in their memories, worshipping her like that, even though maybe in the next cycle Mara stayed with the Nordic ancestors and on Shore's side and Lorkhan's side and all that stuff, and maybe that's how the Nords remember her, yada, 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 yada. It's very complicated, I know. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning the eternal return at all, the eternal recurrence at all, is because if you are still confined within the Godhead, like this misinterpretation, as powerful as you become, when the cycle resets, you too will reset. Yeah, you will reset. If you have become like this, you may not reset. You may retain who you are, your individuality, your sense of self, because you are no longer beholden to the rules and guidelines of the dream. You are your own self, separate from the dream, yet also part of it at the same time. So when the dream resets, when Alduin eats the world, yada yada, you will remain and you will be you. And then the next cycle, you might be able to change things in the next cycle. That might be how Kim ended up working, how each cycle of time changes a little bit, as some people attained to concepts or ideas of Kim and retained partial senses of self, and there's ideas of this in all sorts of cultures, like for example in the Akutan cultures and the Walkabout and the Far Shores, where they try to find a place of existence that is separate from the existence that they're in, so that when time resets and the reality resets, they don't end up getting amnesia of the previous Kalpa. They have senses of ideas, they have some memories of what has happened so that they could carry them onwards into the next cycle, yada, yada, yada. There's so many cultures in this world that have different sets of mythologies and viewings of what this idea is, but this concept seems to exist across all of the cultures in some way, shape, or form, but nobody knows exactly how to get it exactly. My theory is that the only way you could ever get Kim is through Lorcan, and Lorcan's heart, or by proxy, the Numidium. You have to look the concept of you don't exist. You have to look the concept of the Godhead in the face and say, I exist. You have to look it in the face and say, I exist. And you cannot get this wrong and say, I am, all are me. You have to say, I am, all are we. You have to say that in order to get Kim. If you get this, you'll get Anti-Chim and be like Dagoth-Ur. What happened to Dagoth-Ur is technically Dagoth died. He's dead. He died. Well, not Dagoth-Ur, Dagoth, foreign Dagoth, the actual Chimer dude. He died. And what happens is, for every cycle, right, you have the Aetherius, which is the afterlife, where you go and you await the next cycle of time for when you come back into the Mundus or whatever, to do it all over again, maybe in some different way. And you are in the place where you are supposed to be asleep. But instead, Dagoth-Ur is awake in the sleep place. And so he decides to dream that he is alive. So he is in the sleep place. He is dreaming that he is alive. So that he dreams into the Nirn. He dreams of Nirn, and he dreams that he is alive, and so he projects himself into the Nirn. Vorin Dagoth is dead, but Dagoth-Ur is the projection of Vorin Dagoth in the dream place. If that makes sense. That's what Anti-Chim theoretically is. So in a sense, this is how it works. Vivek theoretically figured this out because of his dual nature. He basically built himself up for centuries to be like this, to understand this. He probably used his time as a deity in the tribunal, all of those hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, to understand this, to travel the plains, to talk to the Daedra, do all this stuff. Maybe he did learn the secret word of Kim from Molak Bal. Maybe he did learn this. Maybe he did learn that. Maybe he didn't do exactly this, but he figured this out. Maybe he figured something out over a very long time, that he persisted. He persisted in his existence despite losing his divinity. He found his own sense of power, separate from the need of Lorcan's heart, which is why Vivek is the only one out of the tribunal who could theoretically still be alive. Though Sotha-Sil could probably be alive in a different shape or form. Not necessarily Sotha-Sil's own body, per se, but maybe a progeny, or a clone, or maybe he exists in some way inside the Clockwork City, or some shape or form. Maybe the Clockwork City is Sotha-Sil. It's who knows at this point, right? But the only one I can say with certainty is still around is Vivek. Vivek no longer needs the worship of anybody else to have any sense of power, because he now stands outside of the concept of the Godhead and the rules of the metaphysical reality and all that stuff. He stands outside of that, yet he is within the dream, which means he now has power over the dream. The dream no longer has power over him. He is free. And that's the big concept that Vivek is all about. He's about free. He wants to be free from that. And so he has it. And theoretically, Tiber Septim or Hjalti Earlybeard probably got this ability at some point or some way. Through the Numidium, maybe, or maybe he just achieved the enantiomorph and he's not actually somebody with Kim, and maybe with the enantiomorph we changed the canon somehow from jungle to plains. Even who knows, you know. It's very complicated. He kind of has to have Kim to change Cyrodiil from a jungle to plainslands, or maybe he never did it at all. Maybe somebody else changed Cyrodiil from jungle to plainsland, and Tiber Septim is just taking credit for it. Who knows? You ever thought about that? Who knows at this point, right? Who knows? But it's something to think about.